You know, I love it when my guests arrive in Scotland and they've already done a bit of homework, they've already done some reading, they've already done some research, sometimes for years. But I tend to find that they can arrive with some misconceptions about Scotland, and these are the three main ones that I'd like to clear up for you today. Now today, we're in Craigmillar Castle, and that was built by the Preston family, and then thereafter it was sold on to the Gilmers, who were important law people in Scotland. Very definitely Scottish families, undoubtedly. I wouldn't say they belong to clans. This is where I think a lot of people get mixed up with Scotland. Scotland is a vast country. It's maybe not geographically very big, however, it has intractable places that you can't really get to, and clanship for me is something that only really exists in the Highlands, and to a lesser extent, I guess, in the borders of Scotland. Clanship is not something that's existed forever. We would have had tribal confederations which seem quite similar to clans, stretching way back into Pictish times. But I'm talking about proper history here, times when people were writing things down. And really by the 1000s in this part of Scotland, that would have ceased to be tribal, really. I mean, it's a shifting scale, but from the 1000s onwards, it's really moving away from that idea of clanship. So this cherished idea of clans as being a Scottish phenomenon is in many ways really wrong. I think when many people talk about clans, they think about something from Game of Thrones. They're thinking about these houses, all pervasive, and that everyone belongs to the same family grouping. It's never really been that way. In the Highlands, particularly in the Western Highlands, you have certain families that are strong families. And if you live in a geographical location totally under the power of one particular family, then it's natural that you want to show that you're loyal to that particular kinship grouping. Whether anyone really was, that's a different matter of opinion. The idea that someone would travel over countless miles in order to make sure that they're wearing the correct tartan, very definitely wrong. Tartan itself, probably not as old as you think it is. And indeed, we actually have historiographical records of some of the individuals for whom the various different clans are called. But certainly not everyone in Scotland would belong to a clan. My own family, the Goodalls, have been in Scotland in a secure way. I can trace them back using proper records to 1660. Since then, I can tell you securely that Goodalls have always lived in Scotland. That might be surprising because it doesn't sound a particularly Scottish name, because it's not a particularly Highland name, and that's the important thing. We have many family names that I think of as quintessentially Scotland. People like the Sankers and the Yules and the Strachans. They would never pretend to be a clan. They are a family here in Scotland, a completely different set of circumstances altogether. The clans are something that predominates in a place where the law can't get to. That tends to be in the Western Highlands and down in the Scottish borders. So just because you come from, your family a long time ago comes from Scotland, it doesn't necessarily mean to say that you belong to the clan Sinclair, for instance. You belong to the family of the Sinclairs, and you should be happy with that. Another thing that I think people sometimes struggle with is exactly where Scotland sits within Britain. Now, I'm not talking about geographically here. Scotland is part of Great Britain. But what does Great Britain mean? It's only really talking about the largest landmass within the British Isles. It's never been a claim to the greatness of the country, in spite of what some people south of the border might think. It's purely the claim that of all the British Isles, this is the largest one. You see the same thing in Grand Bohemia, in Gran Canaria, in the Big Island in Hawaii. Many archipelagos of islands will have a great component to it. It's just exactly the same with Great Britain. Scotland has for a very long time, since all of human habitation, been part of Great Britain. Or I should say, the majority of Scotland has been part of Great Britain. All the various different islands which sit round our coast, from the Isle of Skye to the Shetlands to the Orkneys, different matter altogether. together, not actually technically part of Great Britain, but they are part of the United Kingdom. And this is another tricky proposition, because our kingdom became united with England's kingdom in 1603, and yet the United Kingdom as a political entity didn't come into being until 1707, was modified in 1800 when they decided to allow Ireland to have a say in the running, and then again in the 1920s with all the furore that went on whenever Ireland decided that, you know, they'd suffered too long under domination. Scotland is still, at the moment, part of the United Kingdom. Some of us in Scotland would rather that that were not the case. Some of us feel certainly that Scotland's destiny lies separate from that of England, and for me, the difference between Scotland and England is most clearly stated by two of the best known phrases in these two various different countries. In England, every Englishman's home is his castle. In Scotland, we're all Jock Tamson's bairns. We're all the children of John Thompson. Two very different worldviews there. We also have the question of whether the monarchy is now fit for purpose, something which at the moment is a very fraught topic. Many people within Scotland are broadly happy with the monarchy. Many more would rather see a republic, probably more in Scotland than in England. So in an independent Scotland, it would be all to play for the monarchy, that's for sure. But certainly when you talk about something being British, be aware that you don't necessarily mean what you think you mean. Most people will say something is British and assume that they're just talking about England. But in actual fact, you're also equally talking about people in Scotland, people in Northern Ireland, and people in Wales when you talk of something as British. Technically, you're also talking about the Republic of Ireland as well. But I don't think many people in the Republic of Ireland would view themselves as British at all. Nonetheless, they are still part of the British Isles. That's just a matter of geography, in a similar way to the way that the United Kingdom can choose to leave the European Union. They can't choose to leave Europe unless we tow the whole landmass way out into the Atlantic somewhere. That's not going to happen. The last thing to talk about is inevitably the weather. Scotland doesn't have bad weather. Scotland has very unpredictable weather. Billy Connolly famously said there's no such thing as bad weather, just a bad choice of clothing. I don't know if I'd go quite so far as the big un in that. I've seen some pretty terrible weather that no clothing will solve. However, in Scotland, the weather is not unremittingly poor. It is at the moment early March. I'm stood out here in my short-sleeved polo shirt. The weather's not terrible, not at all. I very much doubt that if you chose to come to Scotland that you would be happy enough in a short-sleeved shirt on a day like this. But in Scotland, hey, we need to take what we can get, and for us this is virtually taps-off weather. A day when we would think about taking our shirt off entirely. No, the weather is what it is. And a good tour guide, someone who knows what they're doing, will make the most of whatever weather you have. It's a terrible rainy day. Let's go and see some waterfalls. They'll look absolutely spectacular. Or we have some great museums, some great art galleries to visit. Let's go and do that. And when the sun improves, then we'll do something else. When I first started guiding, you didn't have to make terribly many bookings for anything really. You could get into Edinburgh Castle on the day. That doesn't really happen anymore. So there are some things that we really can't move around, and we'll just have to make the best of them if you booked ahead of time. But there's no reason to avoid Scotland at any time of the year. We can get days like this in the middle of December. We can get days like this, as I say, in March. It could be like this in November. You never know what you're going to get. However, it's also equally possible that the rain could be coming at you sideways, and it'll feel as if it's darting snow. Believe you me, I've been to some properly cold places in my life, and few of them can feel as cold as Scotland when it decides that the weather turns against you. But you know what? We can make the most of it, because as we say in Scotland, today's rain It's tomorrow's whiskey. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. These misconceptions, they're not problems, they're starting points for conversations. And once we move past the tartan-clad myth and the constitutional certainty, once we move past the vagaries of the weather, we can start to plan for a wonderful trip. I hope that you come to Scotland because curiosity is always rewarded here. And I want to finish off this video the way I finish off my emails. Am I yours?